Welcome to Under the Rug at Work, where we shine light on things that are normally swept under the rug. Today, I'm chatting with Mitch Wallis about real conversations. Mitch, thank you so much for coming on the pod today. We've got a lot to get through, but I'm really excited to chat with you.
It's my absolute pleasure, Nick. It's always a pleasure having a conversation with you.
And they do go in different directions, so I'm looking forward to this one
Yeah,
and we'll see where that one ends up. But before we dive in, can you share with us a little bit about your background and what led you to start your own business and the Heart on My Sleeve charity?
in a sentence, I've seen and felt the life-changing, life-saving power of connection firsthand,
Mm.
at work and at home. Before getting my master's degree in clinical psychology and now being a psychology thought leader and traveling the world, working with companies and communities on how to have real conversations and how to build true connection and meaningful relationships. I was at Microsoft. And so my whole world was, corporate guy. And it's one of the things I tell companies when they hire me as a keynote speaker or in learning and development. I say, instead of a guy in a lab jacket saying this is what you should do in theory, like this is what actually I've felt and experienced in practice. And I think that for me, a lot of my work is an ode to my mum and how she raised me as a kid who had complex mental illness from the age of 7 and faced suicidal ideation, and how she could parent me into a person that not only wanted to live, but grabbed life by the horns and thrived despite challenges that are equivalent to living with significant physical disabilities. So she's my first inspiration. My second inspiration is kind of like good manager, bad manager in my old corporate life, and directly contrasting why I felt so psychologically safe under one and watch my career, go from strength to strength, and why I felt so psychologically unsafe under another, and watched it plummet. And I think, through that, I've been able to develop IP called Real Conversations, which has now gone to tens of thousands of people on over 4 continents. And it can actually boost connection as a core skill or capability by up to 4x. So we work with the likes of KPMG and Lend Lease, American Express, Microsoft, even as their main learning and development provider, specifically around leadership capability. And I'm so delighted to see it, transcending boundaries culturally that I never even thought possible.
Yeah. And look, I've been to your boot camp, which is incredible, but I've not heard you speak live on a keynote or about real connections. But I have met people who have, and they cannot stop raving about it and the impact that it has in their workplace.
Mm.
And leadership is tough. It's not something that we're just able to pick up. And you say a lot that, we confuse talking with connecting, which I know that I did when I first became a leader. But can you share a little bit about what the difference is and why that distinction matters when it comes to psychological safety at work?
Yeah, it's so funny. People use those two words interchangeably as synonyms, talking and connecting,
Yeah.
where actually most of my life's work is around helping people understand that tiny nuance in difference is the difference between a healthy relationship and an unhealthy relationship. Because if you only talk to people, you are in the game of information exchange, whether that's with your children, with your partner, with your friends, but relevant to this conversation, with your team, with your colleagues, with your customers. Whereas connection is the equivalent in psychology terms of what's called nervous system regulation. It's the equivalent to actually being psychologically helpful,
Mm.
because people don't feel cared about through the things that you tell them. They feel cared about by the way that you are. I always tell people that you can't say caring things to make it better. You have to be a caring person to make it better. And employees would forego pretty much, research would say, every perk under the sun, whether that's their gym membership or their, yoga at lunch or bananas in the fruit bowl or whatever, just to be able to feel like their manager has their back and that they genuinely give a shit.
Yeah.
And so many managers do give a shit, but they don't know how to behaviorally show that to their team because they haven't crossed the chasm, is a term that I've described in my mind, from, um, a lot of people leaders get there not because they were good with people. They get there because
Yeah.
they were good at marketing or sales or operations or product management or whatever that is. And one day someone taps them on the shoulder and says, you should move into leading this group uh, as a full-time job. And that night they go to bed and they don't change their KPI. And the only thing they need to do the next day for the rest of their life is to drop being a subject matter expert and
Mhm.
pick up the capability of leading subject matter experts to do good work.
Mm.
So 90% of a leader's role when you transition out of being an individual contributor is to nurture and manage relationships, and 10% is to make a small number of high quality decisions. And so this is why I'm so excited about my work in the next 5 to 10 years is that, artificial intelligence is going to automate and scale out a lot of competency that, previously was very human intensive. And what's left in the role of humans at work will be to connect with one another and nurture important relationships and bring the best out of each other. And so EQ gaps are going to become like grossly obvious. And so, if humans aren't the multiplier of AI in the next 5 to 10 years, it's not good for business and it's not good for humanity.
Mm. I was only talking to someone earlier today about a frustration that I have with someone that's supporting me in a in a service-based business. And the reason I have the frustration is because I feel like a number, not because I feel like I'm valued or connected to them. And that connection is, as you said, what's going to take you further. And we need to know how to do that, but we're not given the tools to do
Mm.
that when we become a leader. It's that expectation of, well, you're great at the job. You go to sleep, you wake up the next day with a new business card, a new title, and hopefully some more money, and magically expected to know what to do. So
Mm-hmm.
tools like your book, listening to you live in your boot camp or at the summit, which I'm super excited about, is how you get those tools and how you help reduce some of those mistakes. Because as leaders, we make a lot of mistakes because we're learning as we're going. And can you share some of those common mistakes and that leaders make when they're trying to support someone, specifically when they're struggling, even if they've got good intentions?
Yeah, I think the most leaders don't lack empathy, they leak anxiety. And that anxiety makes people shut down.
Yeah.
The the number one mistake I see people leaders make is not thinking that the people part of their job is part of their job
Mm.
when it is the whole job. They think that the people part of leadership is HR's problem when actually it is the primary responsibility of making a team successful is looking after the humans in it. And what I mean by that is, a classic example, I ran a very senior executive through a workshop a couple of years ago. And at the end of the workshop, he came up and said to me, he said, before today, I can't tell you the amount of people that have confided in me that they're going through a divorce or that their dad's just died or that they got diagnosed with bipolar. And immediately I was drenched in fear that I would say or do something that's going to make them feel worse. And so, in a desperate attempt to help them, I would tell them to go to EAP, go to the GP and get a mental health plan, basically, go anywhere else but here. And I
Mm.
had no idea that I was pointing that way instead of this way. And through real conversations, what leaders are able to learn is how to sit in that awkward and uncomfortable space that's actually the therapeutic space where people feel better. And that is the capability of connection.
Mm.
It's not transactional, it's not an exchange from the mouth, it's a meeting someone from the heart. And, so many leaders at first, before learning my content, will say, well, I don't want to turn into their therapist or their psychologist. And it's like, well, actually, there are football fields in between simply triaging someone to a doctor like a robot and becoming their psychologist. And in the middle, there is called being a leader. Or if you want to simplify it even more, being a human.
Yeah.
And so, in my content, I also refer to the 5 core mistakes that leaders make. And we can actually we have a diagnostic tool that helps leaders in under 3 minutes figure out how their asset has turned into their liability using their primary communication instinct, which reveals their main leadership communication blind spot.
Mm-hmm.
We call that the magician. This is the leader that primarily waves magic wands at everyone, trying to fix them like broken objects in need of repair, thinking that I can make all this pain vanish when actually people are looking for their care and their understanding, not their solutions. And so we help leaders like that maximize their superpower of being an amazing problem solver without tipping into the field of no one ever being able to trust that they can feel heard and understood by this human, because they're just going to tell them what to do. You should or shouldn't do this thing. That's probably the biggest mistake I see leaders making.
Mm.
And by the way, all these ripple to their personal life as well. So, 90 odd % of leaders that would identify as a magician will hear feedback from their spouse or their, husband or wife that they treat them like an employee when they get home, and they, go straight into a work back plan the moment that someone says, I'm feeling distant from you, or that they tell their kids that I wish you'd just empower me to be to grow up sometimes, instead of just taking the reins off me and jumping straight into, I'll go talk to the principal about it, or I'll go, speak with your teacher. And so all these things have really good intention, but we notice that these communication things kind of seep into the most important relationships in your life and the people that matter most. And ironically, we do these mistakes more the more we care about the person we're in connection to, because there feels like lower room for error. But it's just like the Olympics, you train so that you can be in flow. And when you get to the big event, you don't want to then change everything and think and become really rigid. So even though it feels counterintuitive to ask your child how they feel instead of give them direction around what to do, it is the right thing. You have to override your instincts, because that's a trauma response, not a true intuitive response. The second behavior we see from leaders is what's called the thief. Now, the thief, just like the
Yep.
magician, has an amazing intention to want to be able to help, but they define help as empathy through sharing experience, not empathy through validating someone's experience. And they're completely different things. We see thieves jump in with a same or a me too and share a story of their own. But what that actually signals to the person on the other end of that is, well, I now do not have the limelight, and I'm in a state of what's called comparative suffering, which is I now need to think about if what I've said to you is worse than what you've gone through, because if it's not worse, it shouldn't matter. So they feel shame. What they also get confused around is their role dynamics. So am I now supposed to support you back, or is this my chance to lean? And so it creates confusion and ambiguity in the conversation container. So the way that we help thieves move forward with this incredible asset of big-heartedness is sequencing that for the right, timing, and also the right dosing, like putting spice into a dish to make it great. It's all about the how. And also that the moment that someone opens up, we don't need to agree with them. We simply allow them to have an experience and let them know why it makes sense. That is way more validating than saying, I've been there too. The third character is the blind optimist. The blind optimist is constantly silver lining everything, saying it'll be fine because look at the bright side, look at the bright side. An incredible asset, just like all of them, because we're not trying to encourage a generation of victims. However, there is a human psychological truth that is, we will not follow people to point B unless we feel met first at point A. And we have an agreement in my friendship circle that you're not allowed to tell someone to look on the bright side until you've earned the right by first sitting with them in the darkness. So again, it's not this absolute mindset of you just let people be negative and skeptical. No, actually negativity and skepticism can only be flipped once they're vented, then can be turned into optimism and opportunity. The fourth character is the helicopter. The helicopter becomes enmeshed with other people's emotions, probably because they were role modeled it from childhood with, anxious, preoccupied attachment styles, where unless we're overly dramatically worried about someone, unless we become someone's pain, we don't care enough. But
Mm.
what that leads to is what's called contagious dysregulation. And so emotions are scientifically proven to be contagious up to 3 degrees of separation. And so what looks to be a response of overly demonstrating attunement, i.e., the recognition of someone's internal world, is actually a gasoline type tendency of pouring their flame of whatever they're experiencing, sadness or fear, and making it feel unholdable. Because what you're demonstrating in your response is, this is too big for you. It is too big for me. We should be scared of this
Mm.
emotion as opposed to we can hold this emotion. And so, what I help helicopters do is learn that self-regulation, grounding into the moment, not becoming their pain, staying as an island of refuge, like someone who's trying to life save a person who's drowning, not just going straight in so that you get pulled down together, but having some sovereignty and some footing is actually one of the greatest gifts you can give to other people. And it might seem selfish, but it's actually incredibly selfless. And the last communication instinct is that called the ostrich, who buries their head in the sand and says, "Emotions aren't my bag." Probably raised in more of a dismissive, avoidant household, and was not role modeled the active exchange of communication around anything that's vulnerable. And so, the moment this topic pops up, it's kind of like, no, this isn't my job. It's not where I feel comfortable. And what we help ostriches understand is that you're starving people of nature's greatest antibiotic, which is human relationships and connection. And it's also just the bare minimum price to pay if you're in any type of privileged position, such as being a leader, being
Mm.
a parent, being someone's partner, being someone's friend. This is non-negotiable table stakes that you're willing to feel slightly awkward if it means knowing and understanding the person that you care about on a deeper level. And so, we can learn these skills, or more importantly, we can unlearn things from childhood to show up well as an adult. So I know that seems like a lot, and there's going to be people listening to this episode now that go, "Holy shit, I see myself in all 5 of those characters." And the reality is that's true, right? I wrote the book on this stuff quite literally, and I do all 5 of those behaviors every day. It's not about getting it perfect. Dr. Donald Winnicott, who's a British pediatrician, said that a child will grow up well adjusted if a parent gets it right 30% of the time. So my work is, how do you help people hit 30 and then the next day hit 31?
Yeah, I love that. And as you were as you were talking, I could think of other people, and I'm the thief. Sorry, Caroline. And I know when I do it now because I've been to your boot camp, and I'm really looking forward to reading your book to learn more about how not to do that. But I just want to give a live example of a really recent one as well, because I feel the fear and want to be there for people as well. And I'm not saying what I've just done is right or wrong, but I just want to share it because it's happened recently. And I had a really good friend lose a family member, and I didn't know what to do, but I wanted to do something. And they live far away from me. So I would message them every couple of days and just say, just checking in to see how you're going, how you feeling today, how are things. I sent them, instead of a bunch of flowers, I sent them a whole box of like a bouquet of chocolates.
Hmm.
And I checked in on the important days, so Christmas and New Year's, and just to know that I was here and if they needed to have a chat. So it's not someone that works for me, but I work alongside. But I just wanted to know, I wanted them to know that I was here. I had no idea what to do, but I remember when my husband's dad passed away, it was the people who were just checking in that made a real difference. So
Hmm.
yeah, just wanted to share that.
Yeah, I think that's a great demonstration of what we call a care language of gifting, which allows people to know that they're loved without necessarily having to go deep into the convo. And so, I think that what you're doing there is in the top 10% of what you could do, because what 9 out of 10 people would do in that situation is avoid it altogether and hope that no one notices that we're walking around this whole uncomfortable thing of a loss of life. Now,
Mm.
what we help real conversationalists do is become the top 1%. And a real conversationalist in that instance would actually counterintuitively go and what's called sit in the mud.
Mm,
And sitting in the mud with someone is where you actually lean into the pain, just like how you would disinfect a bleeding wound. It's supposed to sting. In
mm,
fact, if it's not stinging because you're like, oh, I'm going toward the pain here, you're not having a real conversation, which
mm,
sounds almost evil, but I'm intentionally being provocative. This is where we try and get people to out of their level of comfort. And how you would help someone who's lost a loved one is you would ask them, hey, tell me a memory that you miss the most about this person.
mm.
And you might be listening, going like, what? That's going to make them relive it and bring it up. Nope.
Yeah.
And a law of the nervous system is avoiding an emotion doesn't make it less real. It just
Yeah.
means it stores and gets compounding interest. The way you release an emotion from your nervous system so that it doesn't store, so that it's not toxic and doesn't become a scheme or a part of who you are, is you experience it so that you can release it. So
Mm,
the whole notion is that you experience it now together, the hard stuff, you put the Dettol on the wound so that it doesn't get infected later, so that we front load the pain and we can actually let it heal. And talking and living that person out loud through grief is one of the best ways to remove the bacteria from the wound.
I love that. And would you suggest something like that for what sit in the mud looks like in practice for a leader or manager?
Yeah, sitting in the mud essentially means like staying regulated with someone who is dysregulated
Mm,
and moving toward the source of what's hurting them most
mm,
without shying away, without running away, without rescuing, without reframing, without rushing, simply joining them in their pain. That is what sitting in the mud means. And it's such a art form and a
mm,
skill and needs to be practiced, because our instinct is to want to make it all fine, you know. And how often do we rush our children to be fine? It's okay, you're okay, it's okay, you're okay. And I mean that has great intent, but meeting children where they are is actually the first response, which
mm,
is, I can see you're sad, calling it out loud. You sound angry. Then we can attend to where they want to be next. But if we're constantly rushing people through pain, they actually never learn to deal with their own shit. And
mm-hmm.
so they go their whole life without a fishing rod because they've been constantly given fish. But eventually, the river's going to run dry and they need to get creative, which is when you have to rely on your own tools.
And then you go to the workplace and you go, well, why do you not know how to deal with this? We have high expectations of leaders and managers, but we often don't get the tools or support or know what to do when we're in that position. So it kind of needs to be a bit of a balance, right? And we do the best
Totally.
we can with what we've got. But what we've got is often what we've been brought up with, or your story about good manager and bad manager. And well, there's not so much a thing as a bad manager. We really want to do the right thing, but we don't know how. And many managers often really feel paralyzed by fear to get it wrong. So we say nothing or say the wrong thing and put our foot in our mouth.
Mm-hmm.
From a psychological perspective, what's actually happening when fear takes over?
Fear takes over because for some reason, a leader assumes that the moment anything vulnerable or emotional is divulged, it's now their entire responsibility to make it go away. So long as you think it's your job to fix that person's emotional issue, you will keep doing things wrong.
Mm,
They're sharing with you to be acknowledged, not to be solved. In
yeah.
fact, it is legally, ethically, and economically negligent to take on their pain and assume it as yours as a manager or yours as a company. In a lot of the cases, bar workers' compensation claims where work is potentially being sourced and cited as the cause or aggravator of the psychosocial risk itself. In the absence of that, when people are saying, hey, I've had a rough day or I've got some shit going on, that is their attempt of offering you a slice of connection. They're trying to reach out just to be understood, right?
Mm,
And so fear goes away from a leader when you shift your definition of success from fixing to listening, from
Mm,
solving to understanding, from pulling this person out of the hole to joining this person in the hole.
mm,
Like in the vast majority of cases, that person knows what to do and has the resources to do it. They're looking for connection. In the rare instances that they don't, you figure that out step by step using basic logic and all the things that we're hardwired to naturally do. The part that we're not naturally wired to do is meet people where they are, because
mm,
unfortunately the brain is a really, really, really old piece of hardware, but the mind, as in the software system that runs in it, is really, really, really new. And so the brain, its whole job is to keep us quote unquote safe. It is a risk mitigation device. That is it. So it's
mm.
going to run away from pain. It's going to emphasize negativity because that's super risky, and it's going to try and make us play small because it's deemed as safe. But actually, it's not safe. To live a safe, truly safe, healthy, courageous life
Mm.
means overriding that really old hardware and trying to get it to catch up with the software by leaning into uncomfortable things. That's why you grow muscle at the gym. If the gym doesn't feel good, you go and you work, you're tearing muscles, but it grows as a result of that tension.
Yeah, I love that. Changing success from fixing it to listening, to understanding, to sit with them. We can do that. Everyone
Yeah.
can do that.
Yep.
That you can win and you can support people on the way.
And Nick, just one more note.
Mm.
It's if someone does come around and go, okay, wow, I can do that. That's a much more accessible and achievable metric whenever I'm entering into some type of emotional conversation versus a practical one. That's when we encourage people to switch technologies from a transactional conversation with something's practical, like how do I fix my computer? You don't need to ask them what computers represented in their childhood, you know? But if someone says my dad's just died, we're in a new technology. It's called a real conversation because it's emotionally led. Um, and we help people understand that not only do you not have to fix it, so that should be exhale one, you have to trust it,
Mm.
which is that once you've listened, it is truly job done.
Yeah.
Truly. And that's the hard part, is sitting in those unclosed loops, because unless that person is immediately feeling better or there's problems still unresolved or whatever, you will lose. A lot of people lose trust in the technology that it hasn't worked. But
Mm.
actually, it has. And this comes back to an ethical discussion around responsibility. They're still responsible for their own life. We can
Yep.
empower them with stuff to help move them forward. But ultimately, the greatest gift we can give them is care. And that's, by the way, true in professional psychological relationships. They did a meta analysis as to why does therapy work? Why does counseling work? People who have degrees in this stuff, not just lay people like regular people managers. And it wasn't the type of intervention used in therapy that was the predictive factor of a positive outcome. It wasn't if someone did cognitive behavioral therapy or dialectical behavioral therapy. It was the quality of the relationship formed between the two that would drive a positive outcome. So it's literally the care exchange that gets people better. That's why two people can go through the same issue. One's totally fine, the other person's not fine, because life is subjective and psychology works with the subjective. And the greatest way to help someone reconcile and move through subjective pain is by feeling loved.
Mm. So much gold in there.
I know there's a lot coming your way.
I love it. And as you know, psychological safety can be built or broken in everyday conversations.
Mhm.
What capability do leaders need to have to get it right consistently?
So I would say the number one capability that a leader will need in the next 5 to 10 years to lead successfully is that of connection. Connection being the ability to understand people, not just fix them.
Yeah.
And understanding people is difficult, but it can absolutely be learned. And when a team member feels understood by you, they'll go to war for you.
Yeah.
They're going to retain, even during times of ambiguity and change management. They're going to have high productivity and performance because they're going to go the extra mile because it's more than a job. They're going to refer and recommend as the best place to work and as a culture that should attract top talent. They're going to take less, you know, optional days off where possible. And so absenteeism will go down and presenteeism, which will go down as well. We're
Mm.
going to see less workers' compensation claims in cultures that people feel genuinely valued at, because relationships are a buffer against workplace injury. They're also one of the main sources of workplace injury when they go wrong. We're
Yeah.
going to see less HR caseload. And
Yeah.
ultimately, the bottom line will be positively impacted by this becoming a part of the way we go to work, as opposed to a nice to have on the side.
Mm. And you can have a different conversation with someone that you've got a good relationship with. Things are easier. You can have those difficult conversations, whether it's for performance improvement or whether it's, you've had a difficult day and you're able to support them because you built that relationship. The
Yeah.
relationships and connections, like you speak in my language, I'm loving this.
Good.
So, for people listening, um, who might be going through some challenging things at the moment, what's one small but high impact thing a leader could do differently in their next conversation with someone who's not okay?
Yeah. So the first is don't avoid it.
Yeah.
Go into it. And I think that if you're sick and tired of asking people, are you okay? And hearing the same old response, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine, then ask them how they're feeling out of 10. We
Mm.
find that that's a super tactical way to cut through, because for whatever reason, people feel less comfortable lying to that. And it's a really easy entry point around, oh, so why that number? Why seven? Why two? Why 10? The second thing is don't feel obliged to make it go away.
Mm.
Go into the pain. If I was to have a mantra on the top of my tombstone that summarized my life's work in 3 words, it's toward the pain. I literally have it tattooed around my collarbone, because I believe that that is the secret unlock to connection, is going toward the pain as opposed to away from it. In fact, I think it's the secret unlock to mental health and psychology, because resilience has the same competency. Is when you learn how to do hard things, your whole life changes, and your nervous system becomes fortified into bamboo, because we still need to be flexible whilst being strong.
Yeah.
So yeah, the first thing is check in using numbers. Don't avoid the conversation. Second thing is don't feel like it's on you to solve it. Go toward the pain and understand them. And the third thing is, be conscious of your boundaries. It's not, one of my favorite sayings, all medicine is poison depending on dosage.
Mm.
Um, you know, zero Panadol is not going to help your headache. Two is probably good. 20 and you might die.
Yeah.
So even connection can be overdosed as readily as it can be underdosed. And this will be driven largely out of our childhood attachment style. And so getting curious around, oh, I think I'm over involved here. And I can see it playing out in a whole bunch of ways. Or I think I'm under involved here, and I think I need to open up a little bit and move toward what we call the green secure center, which is where our needs and their needs are sustainable together over a long period of time, where we're not sacrificing either party, materially.
Mm. Yeah, I love it. There's so many things going on in my mind.
It's all firing,
It is.
firing and wiring.
And that's awesome for leaders. Now, let's look at the organization perspective. How can organizations move beyond relying on good managers and instead embed psychologically safe conversations as a cultural standard? Just a small question for you.
Yeah, I mean that's huge, right? And
Yeah.
and the first is for that to be important,
Yeah.
because a lot of companies at the moment, that will still be something on the side until the risk part of the corporate governance papers say this can't be avoided anymore, because we're seeing a whole bunch of metrics go red.
Yeah.
Um, or leaders come in and go, this is the type of place we want to build because it's the right thing to do. Um, when it becomes important enough, it'll get prioritized.
Mm.
Then how you prioritize it, first and foremost, is it is a top-down initiative first. Leaders set the tone of the workplace, no doubt. They're not wholly accountable for someone else's life. Um, but it is how you get uh, tone to scale. So I think enough people managers having the capability of connection is kind of the next step. Bottom up, what I really see as well is peer support networks having a great role to play. I think it's underutilized. And by the way, one of the biggest mistakes I see HR professionals or just professionals in general making in this space is using the word mental health first aid interchangeably with peer support program.
Mm,
Because mental health first aid is crisis CPR. Yeah. It's a less than 1% use case where someone is suicidal or self harming at work. What's a 99% use case is they want a soft place to land and feel understood as a human. We might call that a real conversation.
mm,
And so a peer support network isn't one that's just done a 2 half-day course on how to stop the emotional bleeding, but it's one that is they have the skills to be able to listen deeply beyond the words that are said, and that they're actively nurtured and managed by someone in the HR team who's not set and forget. Like, this is a living, breathing network of advocates, and they get a lot from it too. They get meaning and purpose and camaraderie and stickiness to company culture and blah, blah, blah. And the last thing I would say is, you know, actively monitoring for psychosocial risk and doing those audits, staying on top of where harm could be occurring and mitigating them to the best extent possible. And that is now no longer a nice to have. That's a legal obligation. And people are flying under the radar, but regulators are coming down hard on it. And I think that, you know, being able to have conversations that are human
mm.
will not be a something that is optional. It's going to start becoming required.
And the only place you don't have those is with a computer. And we work with people all the time.
Yeah.
So we really need to get good at this stuff. And we get good at it by having simple, easy to use tools. And that's exactly the conversation that we have had today. So thank you for such a juicy conversation with your
Yeah.
incredible insights.
Thanks,
And as
Nick.
I said, I cannot wait to read your book and learn more. But for people listening, where can they learn more about you and about real conversations and connect with your work?
Yeah, so the workplace is actually the primary ecosystem in which we embed the skills of real conversations. Um, and as I said, we work with a ton of Fortune 500 companies, and we know how to do this at scale.
Mhm.
If there is a HR manager or a CPO or even a team leader, L&D expert, WHS specialist listening to this who goes, wow, I really want to have this in my workplace, either as a keynote or as a workshop, reach out. Operations@mitchwallis.com is the email. You can go to my website, mitchwallis.com, Wallis with an IS, not an ACE. Many people spell it that way.
Mhm.
And we'd be happy to take you through a free consult, do the diagnostic tool, and just see if there's a fit. And if nothing else, give our 2 cents on how you can create more psychological safety and high performance in your workplace.
Love that. I'll include all of the links below as well in the show notes. But thank you so much. And I cannot wait to see you in person in September at the
Yeah, me too,
Psychosocial
Nick.
Safety
Yeah.
Summit. But we're also doing a couple of other things together. So we're going to have a 1 hour masterclass. We're going to do your virtual boot camp this year as well. So lots of little tasters to be able to understand what this is all about and how it can help you and your organization. So
Hmm.
really appreciate you coming on board and being part of the podcast and sharing so much wisdom and knowledge and insights with us today. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And I just want to say for listeners out there, if you found this conversation valuable, please subscribe and share it. We'll see you next time on Under the Rug at Work, where we continue to shine light on the issues that are too often overlooked.